So in developing Skarn Central View, these are the steps that we took. And fortunately for the copper producing countries, most of them had published some sort of a base case up to 2025, 2030, 2050. And so that was our starting point. And we reviewed those base cases. And the main questions that we went through was, what does it seem sensible? In other words, does it compare with history? Okay. And do they have active participants within the industry that can bring about such change? Is it based on committed projects? And also what future risks should be considered? And specifically, we did make a point of reviewing water stress levels at the countries where hydropower is relevant or significant, using aqueduct tool, which I can mention later on when we go through the rest of the slides. Now, reviewing at the country level, it's not always the same at the provincial or the state level. And we've taken different approaches depending on which country we're looking at. US has state level guidance, so we followed that, while Australia was just reviewed at the federal case for this phase. And in the next phase, we'll be having a more detailed look at what it means for the individual provinces and territories. China has a lot of interstate trading of power, so imports and exports between each state. So what we did then was to model the emission factor for each province based on a consumption basis. We can talk more about China later. And then, of course, country level versus asset level. If the asset is on a dedicated PPA, then it's detached from grid. So what we do is we model those in individually, and there's no further flexing. And then for the rest of the assets, we either index or rebase to match the average grid emission factor. And Lucian can talk more about the methodology in a later slide. And just as a final note, we've, for most of our data where there is reported emissions data, we reconcile to that. And what this type of analysis allows us to do is review those reported numbers just to see how consistent they are across the assets and across the average grid. And in some cases, so mostly in DRC and Zambia, and so it hasn't made a huge difference really to the story, but there was some inconsistencies in the reporting of Scope 2, where presumably the emission factors that were being used to calculate Scope 2 were based on old IEA data, I think. So we readjusted those just to bring those assets a bit more in line with the latest data. And the next phase will be to then review the assets that have a systematic variance from the average grid emission factors to better understand what's going on there.